I have a few questions for you on the bill. How do you square the use of speed cameras with the due process clauses of the Fifth, 14th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution as well as the New York State Constitution?
Um, we've had this program. I don't think that the ability of the state to uh, use red light cameras or speed cameras in any way violates the Constitution, and I don't believe that the ability of jurisdictions to enhance uh, the um, the safety of their streets in any way removes due process. People have the option, just as if you receive a ticket, in the same way that you might receive a ticket or a notice for an easy pass violation. I don't think any of those things actually violate anybody's rights. You do have the right of appeal.
Ms. Glick, isn't it true that the digital evidence obtained constitutes the entirety of the state's case against the ticketed vehicle owner?
Yes, the visible evidence provided by cameras are the sum total, but the cameras do capture the license plate and the area, and there are arguments that one could make about somebody being too close to you or whatever. People have successfully defended themselves against red light cameras, so I don't believe that there is a reason not to continue the program.
Now, Ms. Glick, in a proceeding based upon a summons like we're discussing here, doesn't that kind of a proceeding seek to deprive the ticketed motorist of property, particularly in a sum of money of some sort, deprivation of some
Yeah,
amount?
anytime you get a ticket and you pay it, you are less money. You have less money. There's no question.
So clearly that's a deprivation of property.
I disagree with that premise. I think that our entire system, based on ensuring that you can collect a summons, is the underpinning of civil society, so that when people leave garbage on the sidewalk in violation of sanitation rules, they receive a ticket. Are you suggesting that there is no means under the state or the U.S. Constitution to issue a violation of any law?
No, but in a case like that, typically a sanitation officer of some sort would be there firsthand to issue the violation, will have taken photographs, and you would have the opportunity at that time to either address the sanitation officer giving the ticket or confront them in some type of a tribunal. And in this instance, you don't have that because you have a mechanized device, a camera doing that. So at the time that the alleged violation occurs, the individual, the motorist, does not have the ability to confront their accuser, and they additionally don't have the ability to confront their accuser at a later time in court. And that's why I asked you if the entire case against the defendant in that case was in fact the digital evidence that was acquired from the device.
Yes, I would say that that is, but I don't believe that it in any way violates anybody's right to appeal.
Now, don't you agree that that speed camera laws in fact conflate ownership of the vehicle with the driving of the vehicle at a given time?
It, the $50 fine is for the owner of the car, and in the same way that we might hold somebody responsible for the actions of somebody else. The owner of the car sets the rules of how the car can be operated, And so, yes, they get the fine. They don't get points on their license. The driver is not identified. In some ways, I actually believe that this type of enforcement is the most non-discriminatory that one can have, because you don't have the prejudice of an officer determining that they're going to pick out that person based on age, race, or some other identifying characteristic. So I believe that this is neutral to who is driving the car, which is actually a benefit in terms of the nature of whether or not there is selective enforcement.
So if the benefit is that you skip over the probable cause for the stop, as you're essentially indicating, if that's the benefit, then how do speed cameras actually stop people from speeding if somebody other than the owner of the driver is stopped, is not stopped, but instead the owner of the vehicle receives a summons? How are we punishing the actual driver? How are we preventing that driver from getting into perhaps your car or my car or somebody else's car?
Well, I keep
and
pretty close
continuing-
tabs on my keys.
and continuing in the same behavior. But Ms. Glick, respectfully, isn't it true that somebody could, for instance, rent a vehicle and rent a car and speed? Okay. Now, they can do that repeatedly. They can do that in a rented car. They can do it in a borrowed car. Isn't it true?
Well, it's my experience that when you rent a car, you actually have to provide a credit card and your driver's license. So the rental agency would actually have be able to identify who rented the car and pass that on to them. I think that in most instances, I mean, I'm careful about my registration, because if you leave your registration in your car, then somebody who might have stolen it actually has the registration and could appear to be a legal owner of the car or an authorized driver of the car. So I keep my registration as well as my keys separate from the car. And I would say that if someone, be it a parent or a friend, loans a car or authorizes somebody to drive their car, and the owner receives a summons, it will have the date, the time, the location, and they will be able to go to whoever they authorize to use it and say, you are never getting my car again because you were speeding in a school zone.
So you would agree that the punishment that this bill seeks to exact doesn't necessarily accrue to the perpetrator of the violation?
What was that? Well, if a car is not being driven but parks at a hydrant, there is nobody in the car.
But that's not my question.
I know that's
respectfully.
not your question, but this is my answer to your question. If the car is parked, there isn't a person. The car gets a ticket. The ticket goes to the owner of the car, regardless of who actually parked the car there. So I don't think it's any different.
It's quite different, because the act of parking the vehicle is not the same as the act of speeding that you're looking to
Yes,
prevent
but
here.
you're right. Stationary and movement, totally different.
Correct.
But the reality is that in both instances, the car and therefore the car owner are the people who receive the violation, regardless of whether they were driving the car, parked the car, or sped the car.
But this bill seeks to prevent speeding, correct?
Well, this bill ultimately does intend, and in the same way that if somebody has borrowed your car and parked it in front of a hydrant and you've gotten a summons and they didn't tell you, you know what, I got a ticket, and you get not only a ticket, but then they haven't told you, so you don't have the ticket. It actually, you wind up learning of the ticket when you get the ticket and a penalty because of late, because you didn't actually get the ticket, it went to somebody else. Then you change that person's behavior by never letting them park your car anywhere. This is the same thing. People's behavior will change because I believe in most instances, it will be the owner of the car who has been made the violation, but they, in any event, have authorized people to use their vehicle.
But Ms. Glick, wouldn't your intentions be best served by the pursuit and subsequent arrest of an individual, particularly for the purposes of identification of the perpetrator of the alleged violation?
Let me ask you a question. How many police are on patrol on any given day out of our 35,000 police officers?
I would imagine very many.
Substantially fewer. You have 3 shifts, so you have to divide that by 3 shifts. So then you have to also withdraw from that people who are assigned to specialty units, whether it's counterterrorism or vice or any number of specialty units. So in the end, you probably only have a few thousand police officers that could in fact be engaged in doing direct ticket work. And it has to be people who are with the highway division because they're the ones who have
That's
used
true.
radar guns.
That's
So that is a very small number of police officers, many of whom are not stationed, nor could they be stationed around the schools that would have cameras.
Now, Ms. Glick, when a police officer or a highway police officer stops an individual, they get essentially 2 opportunities to confront their accuser. The first is at the stop. They can ask the police officer, why did you stop me? And they have an opportunity to confront the police officer under the Sixth Amendment at that time. And then they have a second opportunity in the tribunal. Don't you agree that this bill violates the Sixth Amendment Confrontation Clause?
No, I don't actually, and I will say to you that there has been a study of the repeat violators, and it has dropped dramatically. So the number of violations over time has been reduced by specifically repeat violators. So clearly people are getting the message. And I have a question for you.
Yes.
What is your objection to utilizing technology to improve the safety of school children and caregivers near school zones?
Well, I think it's incumbent upon us as legislators to make sure that we abide by our oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States as well as the Constitution of the State of New York. And in my estimation, I believe that this bill violates both the Fifth Amendment, the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, as well as the Confrontation Clause of the Sixth Amendment. And therefore, I have a problem with that, and I think you should as well. Thank you.